What's up, guys, and welcome back to another Sometimes You'll Go to Bed Angry podcast. My name is Rochelle.
What's going on? I'm Sam.
And welcome back to another one. If you are new, hey, glad to have you. And if you're an oldie but goodie, what's up?
What's going on, folks? It's good to have y'all back.
Oh my gosh. So, hi, baby. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, it was another work week. However, our weekend was eventful.
I was about to say, we actually had a pretty good weekend.
I'm worn out from the weekend.
Pretty good packed weekend.
I could use an extra day.
Man, so obviously it was St. Patrick's Day, and one of our friends, we're not really like St. Patrick's Day celebrators, but our friends had a birthday on this day, and so she invited us to like this arcade thing, bowling thing, karaoke, it's all in one type of thing. And so a group of friends of us went, and that was really fun. Mom watched the baby, so we got to just be out with no kid. And
shouts out to the grandmas out there.
Shout out to grandmoms.
Letting adults still have a life.
Right. And so that was really fun. The next day, we took Hillary to the aquarium, and that was fun. Like, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. I was so happy for her. Like, I was just like, oh my gosh, she's going to enjoy this. But the experience itself was just so stressful, like from traffic to just walking around. I was just like, girl, you better get everything out of this because you ain't coming back for another couple years.
Atlanta is basically one giant man trap. Like, you drive into Atlanta and it's traffic. You get to the facility you're trying to go, and it's lines. And you get to the exhibits you're trying to see, and it's more lines.
Yeah, it was just like, what? Oh, there's got to be a better way to do this. When are we going
to get here? Still waiting.
Yeah. So I even had somewhere to, and then like my mom, we took our mom, so she took us out to dinner after that. Yeah. And then like my cousin wanted to go somewhere. At that point, I was like, look, cause I'm going to have
friends even the one to invite us out. We was like, man, we just
I'm going to have to reschedule. Yeah. But normally we are in the crib, or either one of us has a busy weekend, but the other one is chill. So it was good to have a weekend where we were just like doing family stuff, and we both were kind of just engaged. But believe you me, we are worn out.
And above all, Hillary had an amazing time. Yes. She literally got to see. She has like this little toy box we have with all these different animals in it, and the animal packs were half like aquatic animals, the other were land animals. So like the aquatic side of things, she finally got to see all those animals in real life.
Good. I'm like, I love this for you.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
So she's seeing sharks and jellyfish and all that stuff like that.
So I was really happy about it. Okay, well, enough about us. We want to get right into the podcast. Today's podcast is called "An Apology Is Not Accountability." And I feel like this is like a podcast that's like shaking the table. And in this podcast today, we are talking about reconciliation and what that truly means, right?
Exactly.
I feel like as you do this life thing, for many different reasons, you're going to meet people, and you're going to just come from different places. You're going to have different upbringings. You're going to have different expectations. You're going to have just different ways of doing life. And as a result, conflict is natural, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I always say is that, like, I find that a lot of people are afraid of conflict, but it's just like conflict is something that should almost be kind of like, it's just normal. Like, it's just a part of life. But for some reason, it really breaks people down. Reconciliation is really hard for us, right? And we either want to avoid it altogether, or we want to like reconcile, but still do it in a way where like our pride is still intact. So reconciliation ends up being done, it ends up being done halfway. Yeah. Right. And so that's what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about conflict. Obviously, we're married, and so we have our own conflict, between each other sometimes. We've experienced conflict with other people outside of our marriage. This could be family. This could be friends. This can be associates, right? And so we feel like we have not only knowledge on the area of conflict, but we've also like made great strides in how we handle conflict. And so we just kind of wanted to share some of our thoughts with you and hope that you could take this with you in your own relationships.
Yeah, I'd agree, man. I mean, there's just so many different ways that conflict kind of manifests itself. And even the conflict resolution in and of itself, how that manifests itself. So there's so many different, both terrible and great ways that we want to just go over step by step with you guys, man. And we definitely have experience in the area too.
You definitely.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first thing we want to say is that we want to reiterate that conflict is a natural thing.
Yep.
Right? Like, conflict is a natural thing, and running away from it is not healthy, right? You know, again, you have two people coming from different walks of life. And yes, a good goal could be somebody could say, well, you know, why don't I just pick people that are most like me? And sure, right? Like, we're called to be peaceful among all men. And I think a lot of wisdom and discernment is being proactive on the front end and just kind of seeing a person, observing how they operate, and picking and choosing whether you want them to be in your life anyway, right?
Right.
But even when you get it right,
is the lemon worth the squeeze?
Even when you get it right, even when you do all of the wisdom and discernment, you're like, this person's a pretty good person. Like, I think I would like to add them into my life. There are still going to be ways in which you guys are just not clones or twins or alike, and at some point there will be a little bit of tension. And when I say tension, I don't mean like this is brawl in the street. I just mean that you guys will be coming from two different places and have different opinions on how something should be done. Right. And so the thing about finding people that are just like you is that I find that most times when people specifically pick people that are just like them, those people are extremely stubborn, because they have everybody around them that are like pretty much yes people. And so it creates this like bubble force where you can't really see outside of the bubble.
You're always being affirmed.
So you don't see the opportunities for growth or where you could possibly go wrong in this area. It's and all groups do this. It could be friend groups, it could be political groups, it can be racial groups, it can be just groups in general. Like, if you struggle with doing life with people who challenge you and challenge your ideas and your thoughts, then you're going to have a really hard time, because you're just going to be coming from one vantage point.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, in general, when it comes to like surrounding and insulating yourself with a whole bunch of yes men, what's essentially happening is you are, like I said, you're constantly being affirmed. You don't know in any way, shape, or form where your North Star is, because you can't juxtapose it with anyone of a different opinion.
Right.
So therefore, you always think that you're just, in the right space because there's no conflict.
Right.
But once you start to hear other people's opinions, you start to realize, oh, I never thought about it that way. Right. Or if you're not so, open to other people's opinions, you probably have a more stubborn response in which you're telling people, maybe where they can go and kick rocks and stuff like that. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's extremely crippling, very extremely crippling. In addition to that, again, there are people who completely avoid conflict altogether. Yeah. And that is also equally as crippling.
Yeah. It's a handicap.
Right? Especially when you are doing life with people, and especially when it comes to marriage. Like, not wanting conflict is, like you said, it's like a handicap to your relationship, because your relationship never gets a chance to grow. Right. Because everything is being swept under the rug because you're just busy avoiding conflict. It's not that the conflict isn't there or it goes away. It's just we've just hid it for a while. It's like like people have certain areas in their house where it's like all the miscellaneous stuff that you don't know what to do with or you haven't organized yet goes, and it's like that's where it is. It's not gone. Like, it hasn't disappeared. You haven't thrown it away, but it's there. It's just, and it's all piling up.
Yep. And at first it's out of sight, out of mind, and then because you keep letting it pile up, eventually it has to be dealt with and faced squarely.
Right.
But I feel like conflict overall, it shows that you care. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like fight with me. Let me see that you care about me. Fight with me. But no, I'm not fighting. But seriously, it's like when they say that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
Yes.
And so
apathy.
And
Yep.
when you engage in just working through things with somebody, it shows that you love them. And when you choose to like distance yourself from working through something with somebody, that is like, it comes off as indifference.
Yeah.
Conflict shows that you care.
I'm actually reminded of, I remember hearing a story about a former slave, and she was with the Quakers. If y'all remember the history of this nation, the Quakers are the first people who kind of like broke the bounds as far as to say like, yeah, black people should not be in slavery, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Quakers also had issues with actually fellowshipping with those same black people that they believe should be free.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular black woman, having grown up with the Quakers, was like, no, it's not enough that I'm just free.
Mm-hmm.
You are my brother and sister in Christ, and I love you enough to tell you that you are wrong in this issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is what love looks like. This is what conflict looks like, and the proper way to actually handle it.
Right.
It means that you care. That's why you're confronting the person in the first place, because you believe that they have better character than the character that they're
right. Like
right now.
I believe that you're better than this. Like I believe in both of us, because I don't want to be like, oh, it's a you thing and not a me thing, and we're gonna talk about that later. But like conflict, me wanting to engage with, there are some people where it's like, if you give me enough, what is it called? Like if you give me enough resistance, or if you show me certain things about you that like you can't even handle this discussion. Like I'm not even gonna do whatever you want. Like do whatever you want to me. Like I'm not even, I don't really respect your intellect to be able to handle this.
Right.
But if I decide to actually like work through something with you, it's because I respect your mind, and I respect that we're better than this and we can move past this point.
Right.
And so I totally agree with you, man. I feel like conflict means that you are, like I said, like respect. It's like it means you're an able-bodied person with an opinion that I respect.
Yeah.
You know? And so, conflict is not a bad thing. It's actually really good. So, and again, this doesn't mean that you're always looking for conflict, because that's not healthy either. But it means that when you come, you're not surprised. A lot of the times why people don't want to engage in conflict resolution is because they're shocked. How did we get here? And it's like, if you fix your perspective to be like, how did we not get here? Why not? Like we're both sinful creatures. Like why would we not have some type of conflict?
Conflict, right? Either I'm sinning or you're sinning, or both of us are sinning.
Right.
Why would we not end up, intersecting and butting heads on that? Another reason for people showing that they care, or not showing that they care, I should say, and being apathetic, is because they look at how quickly, if I confront this issue, if I have conflict with this person, how quickly will it be resolved?
Elaborate.
Yeah. And what I mean by that is simply that, like, there are some people who say, okay, they make the calculation in their head, and they say, okay, if I confront this person, this probably will be like, maybe, a day or two, or maybe a couple hours, maybe a couple minutes. But they themselves are willing to go through that with that particular person. But then some people, they say to themselves, well, I think this is going to take like, several months on end of back and forth and yada, yada, yada. And therefore I'm not going to have conflict with this person. And that's when the apathy comes in. That's when the lack of the resolution comes in, because they've prejudged that person to not have the ability to come to a resolution with them.
Yeah. And so,
which can be okay, but also can be very wrong. And we'll talk about that later.
Right. So wrapping up this point, conflict is a natural thing. Please do not run from it. God has placed people in your life to help you do life. And sometimes conflict is just God's way of saying this. I want you to learn something in this and sharpen yourself. So you always want to ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me even through this conflict?
Right.
So, all right. We know that conflict is natural. So what do we do when we have conflict, right? It's not about the conflict, like we said. It's not about the conflict itself, but it's about how you handle the conflict, right? And handling conflict the right way can truly make a relationship great. I mean, people feel like that's only like a marriage thing. And honestly, there are different levels of relationships. So yes, when you get married, you do enter into a covenant. And so, you are going to have a lot of conflict till death do you part. But sometimes people feel like you can't have that in relationships that are not a marriage relationship. Right. Like very good friendships get better through conflict handled the right way. Very good in-law relationships. Even when you have kids, like kid relationships when they're older, those relationships can become really great if the conflict is handled in a way that is respectful, and also with reconciliation as the focus and the goal.
Yeah, I think of so many different examples in the Bible. Foremost, the front obviously is Jesus. Him having that inner circle of disciples who he had conflict with. Him still showing like Peter being his ace, and at the same time like being able to tell Peter to himself like get behind me, Satan. Right, but at the same time after he rises from the dead, he's like, let's cook some fish real quick. You know what I'm saying? Let's get this behind us type of situation.
Yeah.
And then even when you have like flawed people in the Bible, David is confronted by I believe it's Jonathan, Jonathan, and Jonathan tells him like, hey, what you did was messed up, bro. Like you took this other man's wife and you put him on the front line to get him killed. That is messed up. And as your friend, I cannot call myself your friend without telling you this,
right?
You know what I'm saying? So I think it's about conflict also almost in a way shows your integrity.
Right.
So that's something I was thinking about as well.
Yeah. And so when we have conflict, how we handle it is important, and how we handle it is all about accountability. Right. We kind of just touched on this. Sam just touched on why we struggle with accountability. It's crazy how many people view accountability as an attack on themselves. And I think that it has a lot to do with just this culture where we are raised to be really hard. Like, we feel like the harder we are is the more serious that we will be taken. And so we always have to present ourselves like we have it all together. We always have to present ourselves like we never do anything wrong. This is why a lot of people, especially women, have a really hard time with apologizing. Or you find men that were, that were raised more so by their mom, like harder to apologize because they have a lot of pride because they view it as a weakness, like I'm showing my slip if for some reason I was ever wrong. Yeah. And I've just never had that mentality. Like I've always just felt like this is life. Like, I think it's just me coming from a Jamaican like household. Like we talk about things pretty freely. Yeah. And so for me, nothing is really taboo for me. Like I feel like we all are humans. We all kind of do the same things. And so like, why would I be afraid to like talk about something with anyone? And so while I make mistakes, so why would I not be able to see that another person could, or my child could, or like my mother could, right? But accountability is what makes conflict worth a while, right? Like just knowing that you have people that respect you enough to acknowledge what is going on.
I think the lesson is truly learned when accountability is actually had. And the only way, how can I say this? If I'm going to be honest about my own upbringing, there is many ways in which accountability was like part of my life, like just a day-to-day thing. Like you had consequences for things. I mean, even I think for boys in general, because we do like to do a lot of rough tumble and play type of stuff, and when we're playing with other boys and other, as we grow up into teenagers and stuff like that, there's always the low undercurrent of violence that can occur from any situation between boys, right? Okay. And because of the undercurrent of violence, you know that before you say something to somebody, understand you could get just hit. You could just get hit in the mouth for being so rude. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, it's one of those things that I also was protected from, right? Because my parents at a certain age they came into a lot of wealth, and they worked hard for that. But at the same time, they insulated us from certain consequences. Maybe we acted up in this way or another, and they insulated us because of their access to certain funds and things like that, things of that nature. So then you didn't get held accountable for certain things, you know what I'm saying? Because, you know, maybe dad made it go away or whatever like that, right? But
made it go away. Were you a criminal?
Not in an illegal sense. Not in an illegal sense. But what I mean is that
ladies, vet the man you married, because
he had his own
here
connections.
I am on year 5 and just found out that my man is a cold stone serial killer that has killed hundreds of people. I'm just kidding. Dramatic.
All right.
But yes.
I just simply think that accountability is something that, I mean, some of y'all had nothing but accountability growing up. Some of y'all had a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of y'all had no accountability.
I'm about to say, like, I feel like I grew up like having, like, I always had to be accountable. Now, maybe not everybody in my family was accountable to me, but I was raised to be accountable, to be considerate, to be etc. And drill sergeant style, and some of those things are still in me today. And so, but yeah, man, like, you know, accountability is very important. Show me a person that does not know how to be accountable, and I will show you a truly weak person emotionally. And so, you know, say you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I hear you. You're tugging at my heartstrings. I need to be more accountable. Where do I start? How do you do it? And so you start with an apology, but before we go into apologies and accountability, let me just say this right now.
All right.
An apology is not accountability.
It's part.
Okay?
Not accountability.
It is not accountability, but it is the first step to reconciliation.
Yeah.
Right?
It's called acknowledgement. That's what it is.
So, an apology it just means that I acknowledge you. Right. And sometimes you don't even get there because people look at an apology as defeat. And so sometimes you can't even get to accountability because the person won't even give you an apology because they're so paralyzed by their pride.
Right.
But say you get past the apology. Say the person you're in conflict with someone and either you apologize or the person apologizes to you. Right. In addition to an apology, accountability is also an acknowledgement of truth.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement of what actually happened, right? It's not we disagreed, we agreed to disagree type of thing. It's what does God say? And how did our actions either go against or support what he says? Right?
Exactly.
And sometimes there is a gray area where God doesn't necessarily give us a command in this area, but outside of that, both people should be able to recall the conflict or the situation, how it happened, looking through the Lord's lens and saying, at which part did I go wrong?
Right.
Yeah.
And I always like to, me and Rome, we've talked about accountability in the past, maybe not just the issue of accountability, but maybe an actual conflict that we've had. We like to go through things chronologically. That's something that is very, very key because a lot of times people bring up the offense that happened and how they felt about the offense and just spill on about how they emotionally felt in the time that it happened.
It's like, how do we get
here? But they
here?
Don't remember chronologically
how
when
we
they
got
first
there.
start, like exactly how we got there.
Yes.
And they forgot how maybe, you know, they actually took an action that hurt your feelings.
Like I always say, like, you know, we're parents now, and it's just like if we are blessed to have another child and, you know, Hillary and her sibling gets into an argument and you know, Hillary was poking at her sibling, poking. And then at some point, the sibling smacks Hillary upside the head. And Hillary comes to me and she's crying because she got smacked upside the head. I'm going to tell the sibling we don't hit, but I'm also going to tell Hillary you had it coming.
Right, exactly.
Okay? And what you're doing is not okay either.
Right.
And so I think they miss that.
It's real easy to do with kids when they're small.
And people miss that. And a lot of times they feel like an apology can mask it. And a lot of times an apology is just a Band-Aid on an open wound, but there's no treatment being put in on the scar.
Yeah.
Right? Acknowledgement of truth, accurate chronological truth is the medicine.
You know what's funny about that, Ro? Even our kid, Hillary has already learned how to say, I'm sorry, guys. Right? She's 2.5. She knows how to say, I'm sorry.
One thing my baby girl do,
she knows how to say that. It's really easy to say that. It's not hard to say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But people do the exact same thing that our child does, just in the grown-up way. They're just trying to say the I'm sorry so they can avoid the consequence of what it is they actually did.
And this is something I had to learn.
We have to do what? We have to pick Hillary up and even show her, this is what you did that was wrong.
And I had to learn this as a wife because it's nothing for me to say I'm sorry. Like in our relationship, I am the person where it's just like, okay, let's talk about it. Okay, you mad? Like, all right, let's apologize. Like, what's the big deal? Like, you mad? Like, let's go watch TV afterwards. Like, and Sam is like,
I'm more.
No,
I like to stew over it. I like to think about it.
But you hurt me.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I had to learn as a wife, is that it's not just an apology, it's making it right as well. And so that brings us to our next point. What separates accountability from just an apology is that accountability has a consequence attached to it. And consequence doesn't necessarily mean that you're losing something. Now, I want to be clear. Sometimes it does, right? Sometimes when you do something to offend someone, you lose that person or you lose their trust forever. So it's important to be mindful of what you're doing and when you're doing it. You can't avoid everything, but it's important to try. You kids can't be out here willy-nilly in it and then expect to get the same person back, right? Yeah. But sometimes the consequence is that you are responsible for rebuilding the relationship.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's where we get tired. It's like, oh, but I apologized. And it's like, okay, you apologized, so? Like, now what? I'm still bruised. I'm still hurting.
Yeah.
Reconciliation means repairing. It means healing. It means patching things up, right? And, I don't want this to be confused with milking things, right? Like, you don't have to be angry if you're not angry. Like, you don't have to beef, right? Like, if you're truly over something and somebody has apologized to you, like, take the apology and move forward, right? Yep. But sometimes there are offenses that take longer to heal than the apology. And it's important that when we are making an apology or trying to take accountability, we are also taking into the account the call to action that accountability has to rebuild what we broke.
Yeah. A common phrase that you can easily use to figure out what your consequence needs to be is, hey, man, how can I make this up to you?
Yeah. And let the person decide.
Let that person decide and be willing to allow that. We have people who have said things to us that is like, well, they literally will talk to other people and say, well, I just don't think that they're going to be willing to forgive. It's like, it's not on you for you to decide if someone is willing to forgive.
Yeah.
It's on you to take accountability. Take Take responsibility for what you did.
Right. Whether the person accepts it or not.
Whether they accept it or not, you come forward, you say what it is that you did, confess that sin, and then say, hey, how can I make this up to you?